There's that moment, I'm sure everybody has it, where they get stopped by the police and they say, oh, well, what did I do wrong? Those type of situations where I've been stopped for no other ostensible reason except for the fact that I was driving while having darker skin and having longer hair, that does stick with me because it reminds me of the times that I've been harassed in America for being a black man just existing.
This is Maurice Shelton, an actor and personal trainer living in Japan. He's only lived in Japan for a decade, but Maurice is part of what could be one of the most significant trials in recent history.
3 foreign-born residents living in Japan are planning to sue the national and local governments. They say they were repeatedly questioned and harassed by police.
Maurice is suing authorities for alleged racial profiling alongside Pakistan-born Syed Zain and Matthew, who says he's been questioned by police at least 70 times. Each plaintiff is seeking 3 million yen, or around $30,000 compensation, in what their lawyers say is the first case of its kind in Japan. The government authorities being sued have declined to comment on the specifics of the case, but human rights advocates say this case is about a broader issue.
In many aspects, it's unprecedented. Japan doesn't have a national law that effectively bans discrimination.
I have stories of like not getting hired because I was a black man, not being able to move into certain places because I'm a foreigner.
It's the big elephant in the room that I think everyone knew was happening. People just didn't want to talk about it.
As the case goes to trial this month, there's a growing national conversation about race and what it means to be Japanese. And it's coming at a critical time for the country.
Japan faces an existential threat, with its birth rate at an all-time low.
Labor shortages are taking a toll.
Lawmakers have passed unprecedented immigration reforms.
But is Japan ready for the new reality?
Japan has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, well below the replacement rate of 2.1, and they're not bringing in enough immigrants to make up the shortfall. This graph shows what that means for the future: a massive elderly population struggling to be supported by a shrinking workforce. And this trend is already taking a toll. This year, Japan lost its place as the world's third largest economy to Germany.
If the labor shortages are not addressed, perhaps Japan may continue to slip. And if the Japanese people are okay with that, all right, no foreigners. But I think many people are unwilling to accept that.
Japan has a notoriously cautious approach to immigration, but politicians are making some changes. Today, Japan is home to 3 million foreigners. It's a record for the country, but it's still tiny given the population is 125 million.
Compared to 10, 20 years ago, it's much more racially and ethnically diverse. If you spend just a week or two in Tokyo, you do see a lot of foreign residents who have a lot of ties in Japan. They have a Japanese spouse, or maybe they even have Japanese children.
But the policy shift hasn't been without controversy. The government was forced to overhaul a foreign trainee program amid allegations of worker abuse and human rights violations. And any effort to boost immigration can be derailed by old ideology.
Conservative ruling party lawmakers, they like to push that narrative that Japan is a completely homogenous society, that, being Japanese means looking a certain way, having Japanese parents.
The battle over the nation's identity erupted when Ukrainian-born Karolina Shino was crowned Miss Japan 2024. She was criticised for not being Japanese enough, even though she had lived in Japan since she was 5, and following a sex scandal, she forfeited the crown.
There's this whole interesting debate. What does it even mean to be Japanese? Does being Japanese necessarily have to mean that you have to be ethnically Japanese, or can you be raised here and be fond of Japanese culture, be knowledgeable about Japanese culture? There was this, I think, reputation of Japanese society being xenophobic, maybe even, racist, maybe having this sort of racially pure ideology. I think it's a bit outdated. I think things are changing.
Even if attitudes are changing, Japan may struggle to attract the foreign workers it needs for 3 reasons. The first is money.
Japanese salaries start relatively low because everything is calculated based upon the assumption of lifelong employment. Every year you get annual increments. But for highly skilled migrants who have no intention to stay, that is not particularly attractive to them.
The next issue is competition. Many developed nations are trying to lure foreign workers, and Japan has restrictive visas, not to mention a historically low exchange rate.
The economic rationale for the foreign workers is no longer strong as it used to be. So we lose a lot of potential Vietnamese worker to Australia rather than come to Japan.
The final issue is culture. Japanese workplaces are governed by a raft of unwritten rules, and foreigners are expected to conform. Communication can be very indirect, context is key, and many big companies simply aren't set up to integrate foreign workers.
People who are higher up, they are pro-internationalization of the workforce, but the people lower down who have to deal with the foreigners, they are struggling because everything has to be translated into English for the foreigners, everything has to be explained, everything is taking extra time and effort, everything is stressful.
There are a lot of companies, especially the bigger ones, that culturally they're not as flexible. On the other hand, a lot of small and medium enterprises who already understands that their survival relies on how they do good with these foreign workers.
Immigration will remain a contentious issue, but as more foreigners arrive in Japan, it's becoming increasingly hard to ignore uncomfortable questions. Questions like, do the police target people based on race?
We want this particular case to start to raise awareness of how people that are in the margins that keep the country going are treated. You gain nothing from abusing the workforce that's going to keep your country afloat.
The fact that we're actually having this conversation and the public is aware of it and the media is reporting it, I think it's a huge step forward. Whatever the ruling is, I think the Japanese police needs to acknowledge that it is happening, that it is systemic.
I think these kind of cases will be weaved into our education system. They will set a new social norms.
And the changing face of this country, it's here. It's just now we have to actually face it front and center, with open eyes and with honest hearts.